Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're jumping straight into a dusty, energetic street scene in the Philippines to look at a totally unconventional national pastime. Imagine a game where your main piece of sporting equipment is literally your footwear. Yep, we're talking about flying slippers. We're going to explore a traditional Philippine game called tumbang preso. But, this isn't just about the rules of a street game. Through the lens of a recent visual creator contest, we're uncovering a deeply moving story about how differently we all experience childhood and what it actually means to look back on those early years with joy. It's a beautifully structured narrative, starting with absolute chaotic fun and ending with some really profound reflection.
Okay, so let's dive right in. When you hear the phrase flying slippers, what instantly comes to your mind? Well, for fans of classic Asian cinema, the author points out it might just trigger a hilarious pop culture flashback. If you've ever seen Stephen Chow's legendary movie Kung Fu Hustle, you absolutely remember the formidable landlady, right? Her absolute signature move was wielding a flying slipper with terrifying, laser-like accuracy. It's such a brilliant visual to anchor our imagination, because the game of Tumang Preso shares that exact same frantic, chaotic, and just incredibly fun energy. But instead of a fierce landlady, just picture a group of neighborhood kids armed with their sandals, ready for action.
So how exactly did this whole topic come up? Well, the author of our source material was actually inspired to share this after entering a visual creator contest hosted by Pixabay. The core theme of the contest was just wonderful. It was all about capturing Philippine colors, culture, and community. To really capture that vibe, the author thought long and hard and initially submitted 2 super detailed, carefully drawn illustrations featuring traditional Philippine desserts and games. But in a classic twist of creative fate, those initial meticulously planned illustrations, they were actually rejected. Instead, it was a totally last-minute addition, this really simple animated GIF of the game Tumbang Preso that ended up snatching a merit award. The author felt this huge sense of comfort and validation in winning with that piece, basically proving that sometimes the raw, energetic reality of community life is just best captured in motion.
Section 1, The Chaos of Tumbang Preso. Let's look at exactly how to play the Philippine national game.
Okay, so here's the step-by-step anatomy of Tumbang Preso, which is basically a high-stakes game of tag combined with target practice. Step 1, you've got one person acting as the guard. Their one and only job is to keep a watchful eye on a simple tin can placed inside a drawn circle. Step 2, all the other players stand a good distance away and they take turns hurling their slippers at that can to knock it over. Now, step 3 is where the pure, unadulterated chaos erupts. The second that can is knocked down, everyone who threw a slipper has to sprint forward, snatch their footwear, and run back to safety. At the exact same time, the guard has to scramble as fast as humanly possible to grab the can and stand it right back up inside the circle. Which brings us to step 4. The very second that can is upright again, the guard can start chasing people. Anyone tagged while trying to retrieve their shoe or running back instantly becomes the new guard for the next round. Just picture the hilarious panic of throwing, sprinting, scrambling, and tagging. It's literally the ultimate expression of wild, free childhood playtime. The author was so thrilled to share this cultural gem, but when they brought it up in conversation with a Filipino friend, a woman in her 70s or 80s who's currently living in Sabah, Malaysia, they hit a totally unexpected wall. The author excitedly asked her about Tumbang Preso, totally assuming this national game would trigger a flood of shared nostalgia. But her friend knew absolutely nothing about it. She was completely unaware of the game. Stunned, the author asked a very simple question. Then what games did you play? Section 2. Different childhood memories. Let's explore what happens when play isn't an option. The sheer bluntness of the friend's response really provides a stark reality check. When asked what games she played, she basically said, "Games? We children all helped our parents work in the fields or herd the cattle. Where would we find the free time?" And then came this incredibly striking quote. "Not helping them and going out to play? Aren't you afraid of getting chased and beaten by them?" This paints such a vivid picture of an agricultural upbringing where survival and family labor took absolute precedence over recreation. For this elderly friend, childhood wasn't defined by the chaotic joy of throwing slippers at a tin can. It was defined by duty, by working the land, and by tending to animals. The very idea of sneaking off to play a game carried the real threat of punishment, simply because every single set of hands was absolutely essential for the family's livelihood. Hearing this stark contrast led the author to a really deep sense of reflection, which is perfectly encapsulated by a specific word they shared, syukur law. This is a Malay term, and it carries this heavy, beautiful meaning of deep thankfulness, a sense of feeling blessed, or experiencing profound relief.
The author points out that anyone listening to this story, really, anyone who was lucky enough to have a childhood that was wild, free, and bursting with the happiness of simple street games, should feel a deep sense of shukrullah. We so often take the freedom of play for granted, right? We just assume it's a default setting of youth. But in reality, having the idle time just to be a kid is a tremendous privilege.
And this brilliantly illustrates the contrasting realities of these two childhoods. On one hand, we have the author's vision, that cultural touchstone of a free, wild, playful youth, perfectly symbolized by dodging flying slippers in a game of tumbang preso. And on the other hand, we have the elderly friend's reality. Days spent entirely on labor, herding cattle and working the fields with literally zero playtime. But here is the most crucial, beautiful takeaway from the source material. You might think about that second reality and feel sadness for the friend. But the author notes that when the elderly woman recalled her childhood, despite the hard labor and the total absence of play, she actually described those days as bringing her a simple happiness. Her childhood was entirely different, totally devoid of games, and yet it wasn't devoid of joy.
Which leaves us with this final, lingering thought. As we consider this whole journey, from the frantic, joyful chaos of flying slippers to the quiet, laborious days of tending cattle, we really have to ask ourselves, what truly defines a happy childhood? Is it the freedom to play without consequence? Or can it be found in the simple, shared rhythms of family survival? The author's story reminds us to be incredibly grateful for the playful moments we had, while also recognizing that joy can take root in the most unexpected, hardworking places. Keep that perspective with you today and take a moment to reflect on what brought simple happiness to your own early years. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.